Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with strawberry crepe cake. That's right, it's a proven scientific fact that people love layers, especially when it comes to dessert. And they get pretty excited if it's just 3 or 4 layers. So you can just imagine the reaction when you hand them something that has like 36 layers. I think. I didn't actually count. But anyway, the point is people like layers. And what we're going to do to achieve a cake with that many is actually stack up crepes. So with that, let's go ahead and get started by making our batter, which will begin with 5 whole large eggs. We are also going to need some all-purpose flour, as well as a little bit of sugar, and a touch of salt, of course. And then I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of vegetable oil, although a lot of people like to use melted butter. But I'm an oil guy. Plus, we're going to be cooking these in a lot of butter. And then we'll go ahead and finish this up with some whole milk. And by the way, the next time I pour something out of this measuring cup and it doesn't dribble all over, will be the first time. And then last but not least, we will add a little bit of real pure vanilla extract. And that's going to be it for this very, very simple batter. What we'll do is take this over to the blender and blend it until very, very smooth, starting off on low speed but finishing on high. And if everything goes according to plan, once blended, your batter should look a little something like this. Okay, relatively thin, but that's exactly how we want it to make crepes. Oh, and this 1/4 cup measuring cup is a little bit of foreshadowing, since that's exactly how much batter we're going to use for each crepe. And then if it was a matter of life and death, you could use the batter now. But this stuff works out much better if you refrigerate it for at least 30 minutes. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. And while that's resting, we can move on to prep our strawberry jam. And I'm going to be transferring 1 jar into this little saucepan. And I said jam, but the label actually said strawberry preserves. And I've really never been that sure of the difference. But it doesn't matter for this. Any fruit jam or preserves will work. And then what we'll do is rinse out the jar with a little splash of water and add that, before heading to the stove, where we're going to bring this up to a simmer over medium heat. And as soon as we see that start to bubble around the edges, we'll go ahead and give it a stir. At which point we're just going to let that simmer for 1 minute. All right, no longer, just 1 minute. At which point we'll turn off the heat, give it one last stir, and simply let it cool down to room temp before we use it. And then once that's set, assuming our batter has rested at least 30 minutes, we can go ahead and butter a skillet placed over medium heat, and we can start cooking the first of many, many, many crepes. And as I mentioned, we're going to pour in exactly a 1/4 cup of batter, and we will tilt that pan until it coats the bottom. And then we're going to cook that first side for about 1.5 minutes, which is, by the way, longer than usual. Okay, since we're going to stack these up and use them for a cake, I do want these well cooked and to have a decent amount of color. So like I said, we'll give that first side about 90 seconds or so. And we'll go ahead and flip it over. And we will give the other side about 1.5 minutes. And that's it. Once that second side's cooked, we'll go ahead and transfer that onto a sheet pan to let it cool. And that's it. We have 1 crepe done. And we only have like 19 to go. And by the way, the times I mentioned earlier about 1.5 minutes per side, that is just an estimate. So don't worry so much about time, as you do getting them to look like this. Okay, we're not trying to get them crispy. But as you can see, we do want a good amount of color on these. And of course, crepes are like snowflakes. And each one's going to look a little bit different, but that's fine. As long as they're all about the same diameter, our cake is going to look magnificent. And if you think about it, we really only need one good-looking one for the top. Having said that, all of mine were beautiful. Even the ones I hid underneath so you couldn't see them. But anyway, we'll go ahead and cook as many as we want or can. And of course, the more you make, the taller your cake, which I really should put on a t-shirt. But anyway, give or take a mistake or two. I think I ended up with 20. And then very important, we need to let these cool all the way down before we start stacking them. And of course, if you want to make those ahead, you can just keep them in the fridge. Or even freeze them until you're ready to use. And then once that's set, the last thing to make would be our whipped cream mixture, which for me is going to start with some mascarpone, no relation to Al Capone. And then besides the mascarpone, I'm also going to add some heavy cream. And then we'll also sweeten this up with a little bit of sugar, as well as a few drops of vanilla. And that's it. We'll take a whisk and mix this until we have some nice stiff peaks. And do yourself a favor and start slowly. Otherwise, you're going to splash this all over. But once our beautifully rich Italian cream cheese starts breaking up, we can whisk a little more aggressively. And we will keep whisking until, like I said, we have stiff peaks. And by the way, if your cream is nice and cold, this is going to happen very quickly. So don't worry about pulling out your electric mixer. Just work that with the whisk for a couple minutes until you have something that looks like this. at which point you definitely want to stop. Because if you keep whisking, you will literally make butter. And if you don't believe me, go watch our How to Make Homemade Butter video. And that's it. Once all our components are prepped, we can start building our crepe cake. So what we'll do is take a crepe and spoon on 2 or 3 tablespoons of our cream mixture. And we'll go ahead and spread that almost all the way to the edge. And then once that's been accomplished, we'll go ahead and drizzle on some of our strawberry mixture. And we'll kind of swirl that in. And if you're wondering, sure, we probably could have just mixed those together. But I thought by keeping them separate, we would have a little bit of visual differentiation, which in hindsight really was not that noticeable in the end. Although it did look pretty cool as I was doing it. So I'm fine with my choice. And then once that crepe was creamed and fruited, we'll go ahead and transfer that onto a serving plate. And we'll repeat that entire process until we're done. And the reason we want to build these on a separate plate is because if you try to do this on your pile of crepes, you might smush and smash the ones underneath and sort of press out the filling, especially since we're using one that's very soft. So I really think we want to do these away from the pile, and then once completed, simply transfer them on top, which is exactly what I did, and did, and did, and did. And by the way, if you're making something that's stacked, and the whole idea is to show off the height, what you don't want to use is a plate with a rim that hides the bottom edge. So right about here, I realized my rookie mistake. I mean, it is just not a smart idea, and visually annoying. So despite the obvious danger, I decided to course correct, and I used a couple spatulas to transfer that onto a nice flat plate, which went pretty well, since that really could have been a disaster. But anyway, all's well that ends well. And by the way, if you're going to build this up nice and high like I did, you really want to make sure these are very well centered, okay, especially if you're using a soft, slippery filling like this. So please pay attention to that. I mean, you are, after all, the jack white of making sure these are stacked right. And if they're not all nice and centered, this can eventually sort of tip over. But anyway, I went ahead and continued stacking until I ran out of my strawberry mixture at what I believe was crepe 18. And once we do get to the last one, we'll go ahead and place our best looking crepe on the top and give that a very gentle pressing. And if all your filling shoots out the sides, you pressed way too hard. And then to finish this off, I'm going to go ahead and dust this all with powdered sugar. And then I finished off with a few fresh berries. And that's it, our very visually impressive strawberry crepe cake is done. And at this point, we really should refrigerate it until it's very cold before we serve it. Which I'm not going to do, because I really wanted to taste this and the sun was going down. So despite this being way too soft, I went ahead and cut a slice, which actually worked out way better than I thought it would. Even though I kind of messed up the bottom layers with the spatula. But no worries, I just hid that with a strawberry. And then I just gave that side a little bit of a fork scrape to clean it up so we can see all those gorgeous layers. And that, my friends, is one fascinating and quite provocative slice of dessert. Which, by the way, really should be served on its side. Because as you'll see, especially in this soft state, it is not something we can very gracefully cut with a fork. But one bite and you're probably not going to care about that. Because even though not properly chilled, this was absolutely fantastic. All right, very reminiscent of strawberry shortcake. And believe it or not, actually quite light on the palate. So to summarize, I'm glad I cut it and ate it before it was ready. Oh, and speaking of chilling this before you eat it, this crepe cake technique really works out the best if you're spreading on a filling like a buttercream or say a chocolate ganache. Okay, things that really firm up when they're chilled. That way your crepes and filling have basically the same density, and it will look way better sliced and hold together much better when you eat it, which is something I'll talk about in the blog post. But anyway, even though it wasn't cold, this still worked out fairly well. And I really did thoroughly enjoy it. But not quite as much as this slice, which I sliced the next day after being fully chilled. And as you can see, we get a much more beautiful, cleaner slice. Plus, we can serve it on its side, which does make it significantly easier to eat. But anyway, that's it, what I'm calling strawberry crepe cake. So whether you're going to make this for some special occasion like Mother's Day brunch, or you just enjoy eating things that have a ridiculous number of layers, either way, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.